She had spent 4 years making sure this man would never find her. Tonight, her 4-year-old daughter walked straight up to him. Angela saw it happen from across the room. 1 second, Nia was in the back where she was supposed to be. The next second, she was standing right next to the most powerful man in the building, tugging on his sleeve like she knew him. Angela froze. Nia reached up and pointed at his neck, at the small, dark, star-shaped birthmark just under his jaw. Then she pointed at her own neck. The same spot, the same mark. "Why do you have the same one as me?" The little girl's voice cut right through the noise of the room. People turned. Glasses stopped clinking. The man looked down at her. Then he did something Angela did not expect. He crouched down to her level. He looked at Nia's neck, then at his own reflection in the glass wall beside him, then back at the child. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Angela was already moving toward them, not running. She couldn't run. Running would make it worse. She just walked steady, calm, the same way she had trained herself to do everything for the past 4 years. He looked up before she got there, and the moment his eyes found hers, she knew. He already understood. "Hello, Angela." He said her name like he had said it 1,000 times in empty rooms. She stopped in front of him. Nia pressed back against her legs, still staring at his neck, still thinking about the mark. "She's been asking about that mark since she was 2, Angela said. "I told her it was a map, that one day it would lead her somewhere important." He looked at Nia for a long moment. Something moved across his face, something quiet and private, like a man seeing a piece of himself he didn't know was missing. Then he looked back at Angela. "How old is she?" She didn't answer, because right at that moment she noticed something that made everything inside her go still. A man standing near the far corridor. Dark jacket. Not talking to anyone. Not eating. Not drinking. Just watching the 3 of them with the kind of stillness that doesn't happen by accident. He had been there before Jang even walked in, and now he was lifting his phone. If you can already feel where this is going, you belong here. Subscribe to Velvet Noir. This is the kind of story we tell. Angela looked back at Jang. His eyes had already moved to the corridor and come back. He had seen the man too. Neither of them said anything about it. They didn't need to. Someone else had known this night was coming. Someone who had been watching and waiting long before Angela had made her move. "Pick her up," she said quietly, "and follow me." Jang looked down at Nia. "Do you want to come with me?" Nia looked up at her mother. Angela gave a small nod. "Okay," Nia said, and she lifted her arms straight up the way little children do when they fully trust someone to a man she had never met in her life. Jang picked up a child he had never met and followed a waitress toward the kitchen. Angela moved fast. Not running draws attention. Just walking with the kind of purpose that makes people step aside without knowing why. 8 months working this lodge had taught her exactly how to move through a room full of people who never looked at the staff. She knew how Nia had gotten out. The break room door took 11 seconds to close all the way. Angela had timed it on her 3rd shift. She had planned for a lot of things. A 4-year-old who followed the sound of music like it was calling her name was not one of them. Behind her, she heard one set of footsteps break away from the crowd. The man in the dark jacket. She didn't look back. The kitchen was loud and bright. Nobody looked up when she pushed through the door. Then Jang walked in carrying Nia and everything stopped. A cook stared. A server forgot she was pouring. "Keep moving," Angela said without turning around. He kept moving. She took him through the back of the kitchen, down a narrow hallway that smelled like old wood and cold stone, and into the staff locker room at the end of it. Cedar walls. 2 wooden benches. 1 small window facing the water. She locked the door. Nia had fallen asleep somewhere between the kitchen and the hallway. Her small fist was curled against Jang's jacket. Her face was completely peaceful. Angela looked at that for 1 second longer than she should have. Her daughter asleep against this man's chest like she had always known he was safe. She turned to the window instead. 3 black SUVs in the driveway. None of them had moved. "They're waiting," Jang said. "If they were here to make arrests, they'd already be inside." "I know." She turned around. The man in the corridor. "His name is Taesung Park. He works for someone who has been watching you for a long time. Watching us both." He looked at her carefully. "How do you know that?" "Because I've been watching them back." She leaned forward and said 3 words quietly. "Just for him. Project Cerberus." The change was immediate. Everything he had been holding together since the pavilion, the calm, the control, the careful assessment dropped for exactly 2 seconds. His jaw tightened. His eyes sharpened into something colder than anything she had seen from him tonight. "How long have you known about Cerberus?" he said. "Long enough." She sat down on the bench across from him. Long enough to know that the people outside that window are not your biggest problem tonight. Then what is? She held his gaze. Someone sent a message 2 days ago. I intercepted it. She paused. It said, "Bring me the girl." She watched his face change completely. This was no longer about money or power or the SUVs in the driveway. This was something older and more dangerous than all of that. The same person who sent that message, she said quietly, is the one who knows you are here tonight. Which means before this night is over, we find out who they are. The room went quiet. Not the quiet of an empty space. The quiet of a man realizing something has been happening around him that he did not see coming. He looked at the sleeping child on his shoulder. Then at Angela. Outside, a fourth SUV pulled silently into the driveway. Jang set his phone face down on the bench. He made a call the moment we left the room, he said. Yes. Angela was already at the window. The fourth SUV had parked sideways across the driveway, blocking the exit. Whoever he reports to knows we are together, knows Nia is with us. How much time do we have? Not much. I know how they sequence a building like this. I spent 3 years working alongside federal investigators before I disappeared. They cut the servers first. Then they come inside. We have about 10 minutes from now. He looked at her. You planned this whole night. I planned most of it. She turned from the window. The catering job, the lodge, all of it. I needed to be in the same room as you before the window closed. What window? The people outside that driveway, they've been building a case against you. When that case closes, everything connected to your name gets frozen. Locked. Unreachable. She sat down. I needed to move before that happened. For Nia. He was quiet for a moment. In the amber emergency light, his face was unreadable. But she had spent 3 years learning to read it anyway. You've been inside my finances, he said. Yes. For how long? 3 years. He didn't raise his voice. That was the thing about him she had never forgotten. He never raised his voice when something surprised him. He just went very still and very quiet, and his eyes got sharper. She's been asking about that mark since she was 2, Angela said, before he could respond. Every time she saw it in the mirror, she would ask me about it. I told her it meant she belonged somewhere, that the mark would lead her to where she was supposed to be. She paused. I never told her it belonged to a person. He looked at Nia sleeping against his shoulder. Something moved through his expression that had nothing strategic in it. Why tonight? He said. Why this place? Because you come here every October. Because a new face in the catering staff doesn't raise questions. Because this building sits on private water with 3 ways out that nobody monitors after 9 p.m. She met his eyes. And because the man above Park was planning to make his own move within the month, I needed to go first. And instead he knew you were coming. He knew I'd be here before I confirmed it myself. There's someone closer than I realized. She stood. That's the problem we solve after we're out. His phone vibrated on the bench. He looked at it, showed it to her without saying anything. 2 words from Byung-Soo's number. He knows. She picked up the bag she had already packed and already hidden behind the last locker 3 weeks ago. We move now, she said. Nia slept through all of it. Her small face completely still, completely trusting. Angela looked at her daughter one more time and then looked away because there was no time left for looking. How do you know what they'll do next? Jang asked. I've seen it before. I spent 3 years working alongside federal investigators before I disappeared. I know exactly how they move. She went to the window. The SUVs hadn't moved, but their engines were running now. She could see the exhaust rising in the cold air. They cut the power to the servers first, stop anything from being sent out. Then they come inside. She turned. We have about 8 minutes. You said you've been inside my accounts for 3 years. Yes. Then you know what's in them. I know everything that's in them. She sat back down. I also know what you've been trying to hide. And I know that the people outside found most of it 6 weeks ago. He looked at her steadily. Most of it. I moved what was left. Quietly. Over the past 3 years, I took small amounts. Never enough to trigger an alert. Never enough to look like theft. She held his gaze. It wasn't theft. I was setting it aside. For Nia. So that whatever happened to your world, however it ended, she would have something that couldn't be touched. He was quiet for a long moment. Show me, he said. She pulled a folded piece of paper from inside her dress. 1 page, dense with numbers. She had printed it 3 days ago at the public library in town. She held it out. He read it fast. She watched his eyes move down the page, watched the exact moment he understood what she had built. You protected it, he said. Not a question. Someone had to. He looked at Nia. At the rise and fall of her small chest, at the star-shaped birthmark on her neck that matched exactly the mark his grandmother had named after a constellation and said would always find its way home. Park is still inside the building, Angela said. By now, the investigators have the room locked down. He can't leave without being processed. Whatever he knows about tonight, he's going to be sitting across a table from federal investigators trying to explain it. She picked up the bag. He's not our problem anymore. The person above him is. The people above Park, she continued. They knew about Nia before tonight. That message wasn't improvised. They've been building toward a moment where they could use her against you. She leaned forward. We find that name. When we're out and she's safe, we find it together. He folded the paper. His ring finger tapped once against his knee without him noticing. She noticed. She said nothing. Tell me what we're walking into, he said. A maintenance path on the north side of the building. 50 meters to a private dock. There's a boat, registered to a company that has nothing to do with either of our names. She stood. Full tank, supplies, documents. You planned for all of this. I planned for every version of this night I could think of. She picked up the bag. The version where you didn't come. The version where you came with more security. The version where Nia didn't find you first. She looked at him. I didn't plan for the version where you crouched down to her level. He looked at her. She looked away. 4 minutes, she said. Then we move. The lights went out. Not all of them. The emergency strips on the ceiling came on a low amber glow that made everything look warmer than it was. Through the door they could hear the pavilion changing. The music stopped. Voices shifted from relaxed to careful. The people outside were cutting the power. 6 minutes, Angela said. Maybe less. Jang was watching her. You've been studying me. Yes. For how long? Since before I took the catering job. She didn't apologize for it. There was nothing to apologize for. I watched footage. I read everything I could find. I needed to understand how you think. And you tap your ring finger when you're deciding who to give up. She said it simply. No drama. You did it just now. Against your knee. You do it every time you're calculating a sacrifice. He looked at his hand. You were already planning to hand Byung-soo to the investigators, she said. Before tonight. You knew he had been selling your information. You were going to let them find him and use that to slow everything down. He didn't deny it. The problem is, he knew you were going to do it. So he moved first. He told the people above him about tonight. About me. About Nia. She paused. And whoever is above him used it. Jang crossed the room and stood over the bench where Nia was sleeping. He looked at her for a long moment. The amber light caught the birthmark on her neck, the same mark on his, side by side in the same family, separated by an ocean and 4 years and 2 people who had been too careful and too afraid and too proud to reach for each other. Angela looked at the wall. She had built 4 years of distance on the belief that distance was the only safe thing. Standing in this room, it was starting to feel like the most expensive mistake she had ever made. The documents I have for you, she said, pulling herself back. The new identity. I built it around who you actually are, not who the old name required you to be. You'll be able to have real conversations in your new life without performing a character. She paused. That matters more than most people think. He turned. You've seen every move I've made for 3 years, he said. And you still built me a way out. I built Nia a father who wasn't in a prison cell, she said. Everything else came with it. His ring finger was completely still. Tell me where to sign, he said. 5 years ago, Washington, D.C. smelled like rain and strong coffee, and the specific kind of tension that fills a room when everyone in it believes they are the most important person there. Angela had been hired to find the weaknesses in other people's plans. She had been doing a version of that her whole life. She was good at it the way some people are good at music, not because they practiced, but because the thing lived inside them already. She found Jang Woo on the second day. He was standing at a window during a break, looking at the rain. She stood beside him. Neither of them spoke for 4 minutes. Then he said, without turning his head, the Vargas Group is going to collapse their own deal by Thursday. I know, she said. I told them to. He turned. And something happened in that moment that Angela had never been able to fully name. Not attraction exactly. Something more unsettling than that. Like recognizing a language you thought only you spoke. They didn't fall in love that week. She needed to be clear about that. What happened was rarer and harder to walk away from. For 3 days, they talked the way people talk when they are completely exhausted by having to be careful. They argued. They were honest. They said things in that room that they had never said to anyone else. On the 3rd night, he said, "You're going to leave after this." "Yes," she said, "because of my world. Because of what your world does to people you care about." She had looked at him steadily. "I've seen your history. The people who got close to you for reasons that weren't business. What happened to them?" He didn't argue. He never argued with the truth. She left before sunrise. No note. A note was a thread, and threads could be pulled. 11 days later, she was sitting in a pharmacy parking lot in the rain, learning that she had left with more than she planned. She did not call him. She thought about it every single day for 4 years. Not because she was weak. She needed that to be understood. She had done the calculation. A child in his world was a target. She had chosen safety over everything else, including herself. But she had watched him. She told herself it was practical. She needed to monitor his situation, protect what she was building for Nia. That was true. It wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was that on certain nights, when Nia tilted her head at that particular angle, she let herself feel it, the full weight of what she had chosen not to have. She had a rule for it. 4 minutes. Exactly 4. She would set a timer on her phone and sit with the feeling, and when the 4 minutes were done, she would put it away like something she had looked at for long enough. Then she went back to work. She had kept that rule for 4 years without breaking it once. She had never said any of this out loud. She came back to the present, to the amber light, to Jang watching her face like he had just done the same calculation and arrived at the same number. "You knew," he said quietly, "what this was going to cost you." "Yes, and you built me a way forward anyway." "I built Nia a father," she said. He was quiet. "I built Nia a father," she said again. And one more time, soft, just for herself. "I built Nia a father." "Jang," she stood. "We have 6 minutes." Behind the last locker there was a door. Angela had propped it open on her 3rd shift with a small rubber wedge she bought at a hardware store in town. She had placed 5 more just like it at other exits around the building over the following weeks. One on the east side she left unpropped deliberately so that anyone looking for their escape route would waste time on the wrong door. She moved the locker aside. Jang watched her do it with the quiet attention of a man realizing the woman in front of him had been several steps ahead of him for a very long time. "North side of the building," she said. "Follow the path to the dock. 50 meters. The boat is at the end. And the identity documents." She laid them on the bench beside him. A new name, a new history. A life she had built backwards from who he actually was, so that every conversation he had in his new life would feel true, because it was drawn from real knowledge, real experience, a real person, just with a different name. "I need you to sign the accounts into my name," she said. "The ones that haven't been found. Once you do that, they're safe, protected, because I don't exist in your world. My name is nowhere in your records. That makes my accounts the one place nobody is looking." He looked at the documents, then at her. "If I do this," he said, "and you disappear, I have nothing. I know. You'd have everything. I know that too. So I'm trusting you." "Yes." He held her gaze for a long moment. She didn't look away. "I knew someone had been inside my accounts," he said quietly. 3 years ago, my team spent months trying to find the source. I told them to stop." He paused. "I told myself it was because the amounts were too small to matter." Another pause. "That wasn't why." She waited. "I let it happen," he said, "because whatever was in those accounts was being protected. Not taken, protected. And I wanted to understand why before I closed the door on it." He picked up the pen. "Now I understand," he said. He signed. She took the documents, folded them, placed them in the bag. "The name above Park," she said. "When we're out and Nia is safe, we find it together. Because until we do, tonight isn't finished." He stood. He picked up Nia without waking her. The child made a soft sound and pressed closer to his shoulder. "Together," he said. She believed him. She surprised herself with how much she believed him. Angela carried the bag. Jang carried Nia. Nobody discussed it. It just happened that way in the 3 seconds before they went through the door. And it told her something she decided to think about later, when there was time for thinking. The path outside was narrow and dark, and smelled like cold salt water and wet pine. Fog had come in off the water while they were inside, thick enough to make the world shrink to 20 meters in every direction. Angela stayed close to the tree line. Jang matched her pace without being told. He adjusted his steps each time Nia shifted on his shoulder. Behind them, the lodge was lit up and getting louder. They had about 10 minutes before running became the only option. 15 meters from the dock, she heard it. A low hum above the tree line. Small, mechanical, moving in a slow arc from east to west. She stopped. Jang stopped beside her. "Drone," she said. "Thermal camera. Not the investigators, they would have made more noise arriving. This belongs to the people above Park." She looked at the path ahead. The dock was exposed. If they crossed now, the drone would pick them up in seconds. She pointed left, into the trees. They moved without speaking, pressed back under a cluster of old firs, low and still. Jang turned his body so that Nia was facing away from the sky. Angela crouched beside them and watched the drone track overhead. She had mapped these trees 6 weeks ago, counted the gaps in the canopy, found the places where the coverage was too dense for a thermal camera to read clearly. She had stood in this exact spot on a quiet morning pretending to take a walk and memorized every meter of it. The drone passed over. She counted to 8. Now, they came out of the trees and covered the last stretch fast. The dock appeared out of the fog, old wood, dark water, and at the end of it, exactly where she had left it, the boat. She stepped down first. Jang passed Nia to her warm and solid and completely asleep, and she held her daughter against her chest for a moment before settling her in the covered bow under the blanket she had packed 3 weeks ago, including a change of clothes for Nia, including the small stuffed rabbit that Nia could not sleep without. She had thought of everything. Jang stepped aboard quietly. She started the engine. It came up smooth and low, exactly as it had both times she had tested it. They moved out into the fog. The dock disappeared. The lodge disappeared. The world became just water and fog, and the slow, clear appearance of stars through the breaking cloud above them. Then her phone moved in her pocket. Unknown number. 4 words. "I know where you're going." She looked at it for 3 seconds, then showed it to Jang. He looked at the water ahead. "The name," he said. "Yes," she said. "They're not done." She held the wheel steady and watched the fog open ahead of them and did not let her face show a single thing. The lodge was glowing in the distance. Not on fire, just lit up. All those lights and all that carefully built power reduced now to a warm smear in the fog behind them. It looked almost peaceful from out here on the water. It looked like something that had nothing to do with either of them anymore. Jang stood in the back of the boat and watched it. Angela let him. She kept her hand on the wheel and her eyes on the water ahead and gave him the space to feel whatever needed to be felt. She had always known this moment was coming. She had not known it would look this quiet. He sat down after a while. "I told myself I was fighting to protect people," he said. "My staff, the people who depended on the company." He was quiet for a moment. "That was part of it. The rest of it was my name. I didn't want to be the man who lost." Angela said nothing. "You didn't lose," she said eventually. "You moved before they could take anything. There's a difference." He looked at her. "Nia is safe," she said. "What was meant for her is safe. You have a name and a life that fits who you actually are." She paused. "That's not losing." He was quiet for a long time. The water moved under them. Stars were coming out above, one at a time, through the clearing fog. "The message on the dock," he said. 3 names it could be. I'll know which one within 2 days. I have a way in." She glanced at him. "When I know we go after them together." "Agreed." He stood. He moved forward through the boat slowly, careful not to wake Nia in the bow. He came to stand beside Angela at the wheel. Close, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of him in the cold air. She was very aware of the space between them. "I knew someone was inside my accounts," he said. 3 years ago. My team spent months on it. I shut the investigation down before they finished." He looked at her face in the dark. "I told myself the amounts were too small. The access was too clean. It didn't feel like an attack." She looked at the water. "The full truth," he said, "is that I already knew. Not your name, not where you were, but the shape of it, the way it worked without taking, the way it stayed close without making a sound." He paused. "I let it happen because I wanted to be found. I just didn't know until tonight what I was hoping to be found by." She reached over. She switched the autopilot on. She turned to face him. The stars were out above them now, clear and cold and very far away. The fog was gone. The water was dark and steady beneath them. She thought about the rule. 4 minutes. The timer she had set every time and never once let run over for 4 years. She let it run. No timer. No stopping. no putting it away when it got too heavy. She didn't time it. The cabin was small and warm and smelled like cedar and a fire that had been burning for a long time. Nia inspected every room. She checked the window views. She approved of the blanket on her bed. She found a chipped blue mug on the kitchen shelf and decided she liked it and put it on her nightstand. She had woken up between the boat and the dock with the calm of a child who had already decided everything was fine. She looked at Jang and said, "You held me the whole time." He said, "I did." She said, "Okay," and went to look at the cabin. That was 4 hours ago. She was asleep now in the back room. The fire had settled into low red coals. Angela and Jang sat at the small wooden table, with 2 cups of something from the emergency kit that had been in the cabinet for what tasted like several years. "I have the name," Angela said. She put her phone on the table between them. He looked at it. His hand on the table went very still. "Shin Dae-won," he said. "You know him. We built the original structure together, 12 years ago." He looked at the name for a long moment. "He was the one who first told me that the most dangerous people in any room are the ones you trusted before you knew what trust cost." A pause. "I should have remembered who taught me that." "He thought you were going to give him up to protect yourself," Angela said. "He decided to move first. 2 days ago he sent the message I intercepted." She held Jang's gaze. "Bring me the girl." That was him. He knew that if the case got close enough to make you consider talking, Nia was what he was going to hold over you. Jang was very still. "He had been planning it for months," Angela said. "Not improvised. Calculated." He watched and waited, and the moment he saw an opportunity, he used it. She paused. "He didn't know I was watching him back." "He has a daughter," Jang said quietly. "She's 6. Angela said nothing. She let him hold that. "He won't stop," Jang said. "No, but I've already sent everything I have on his operation to someone at Financial Crimes. Anonymously. It will take them 3 or 4 weeks to act on it. By then we're gone. Completely." She wrapped both hands around her cup. "The threat isn't finished. I want to be honest about that, but it's managed." He looked at the fire. "Someone once said that the most dangerous thing a person can do is become so good at protecting themselves that they forget what they were protecting themselves for." Angela had been thinking about that for 4 years without knowing it was a thought. "I built walls," she said quietly. "Not to him exactly. Just out loud. The way you say something when you finally stop carrying it alone. I told myself the walls were for Nia, and they were. But I also built them because I was afraid of what would happen if I didn't." He looked at her. "I'm still a little afraid," she said. "So am I," he said. "If you made it to the end of this story, you already know what Velvet Noir is. It's for people who feel things deeply and aren't embarrassed about it. Subscribe. Stay. The next story is already waiting for you." He reached across the table, just his hand, open, palm up, no words attached to it. She looked at it for a long moment. "If you were Angela, would you have stayed silent for 4 years? Or would you have found a way to tell him sooner? Tell us in the comments. We read every single one." She put her hand in his. "We aren't going to be happy, Jang," she said. "We're going to be invisible, and that is much harder." Something in his face, the last thing he had been holding, finally let go. "I know," he said. "I'm in." Outside the window, the sky above the trees was clear from edge to edge. And there above the tree line, small and dark and specific against the night, 5 stars in the shape of a mark that 2 people carried on their necks, and 1 small child carried on hers, pointing, as it always had, toward home.